What's going on, y'all? It's Virtue. Man, I almost introed that like TG. And so today I'm joined by TG. You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
What's going on, guys? TG or Thunder God here.
Okay, enough of that. Now, let's go on to basically we're going to be talking about why pain demolishes every single company in the war. No, I'm kidding, but that's what I'm saying. I'm sure you guys have heard the comparisons through basically that Pain soloed the whole Leaf Village, and the Leaf Village was a fifth of the Shinobi Alliance, so Pain soloed a whole fifth of the Shinobi Alliance. So have you ever thought, what if Pain actually fought each company in, say, the villains or bad guys' place, such as replacing Kinkaku and Ginkaku with Pain, or the Edo Kage with Pain? As I figured this is actually a pretty good match, so today me and TG, we're just going to be going into this in some pretty good detail, and I suppose we can kind of start with Pain, which I guess I can lead with as well. And Pain is he's quite strong. Now, firstly, his crowd control by this point is very good, especially with like his summons where he has like the replicating dog, which basically even like the Rasen Shuriken can't take down. It's only to like the Amaterasu, and it could have just been potentially desummoned, as to why it's not shown. He also has other ones like the Chameleon where he can hide in his mouth and use a Shinra Tensei, which is pretty telling. He has the others that you might not notice, like the Ox, Bull, Bird, Crab, and Centipede, Rhino, and even the Panda. And while the Panda isn't really, seemingly that impressive, it was able to block Kabari Sinbon, Jiraiya's fastest attack in Sage mode. So, this would also be a Jiraiya who already proclaimed himself to be in the Sannin, or, the Hermit Sage, rather than the Prodigal 3 that he was previously in, referencing his base state. So, Jiraiya in Sage mode is already above, like, his Sannin form. And then Pain basically beats him up. And this animal path is also a talking point for Jiraiya's benefit, where they talk about Jiraiya kicking the animal path in the chest. But this is likely just due to the animal path falling down and being incapable of just flying around in the air. And he also is weaving signs, literally, so it's not that bad of like an anti-feat or anything like that, or of the sort. And we also know that there are statements like Orochimaru being equals with Jiraiya, and then Orochimaru is generally considered the strongest Sannin, so maybe you think he's equals with, say, Jiraiya. It's still pretty irrelevant considering Pain is above both. And this Orochimaru is able to fight equally with Old Man Hiruzen, who's stated to be the strongest of the 5 Kage. So he's pretty, like, he's in this higher tier of power, even in comparison to like these high Kage level combatants. So Pain is not in like these low tiers. He's also stated to actually surpass Sage Naruto in power. This Sage Naruto was stated to have surpassed his predecessors, and we also get a silhouette of Tsunade looking at them. And we don't really know like Tsunade's knowledge, like her max amount of knowledge on Hokage Minato's power. It's probably likely just stories and whatnot, or how he protected the village, and her now picturing Naruto to do the same. We do know that like him being above Jiraiya is just consistent, as he does a lot better against Pain than Jiraiya, and then Pain is still stated to just be stronger, and he has to hold back the whole fight. And this is also a very fatigued Pain, and we will just be taking the Pain that actually goes in and fights the Leaf Village, so he will still have like a chaotic Shinra Tensei for each company that he can still use, and still basically get the same performance out of what he did, if not better, considering he did fight the whole Leaf Village. And we're just going to be giving him like some regen after every single battlefield and whatnot. Do you want to touch on Pain or anything else like that? This brief section.
I mean, I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I don't want to just diminish, I don't want to like mess up anything you said. The only thing I'd probably add or put forth as well is the possibility that a full power Pain would just upscale from gray-haired Nagato, just due to like full power Pain being the result of red-haired Nagato's chakra. Obviously not the exact same version that's in the war, but I think there is enough to suggest that a full power Pain would just have reserves greater than the gray-haired Nagato. And gray-haired Nagato himself isn't garbage. He's actually able to tag Sage Mode Naruto from close range when Naruto actually finds his hideout. He's able to tag him. He was actually going to control him from that range until Naruto's QB chakra started to leak out. He also just is shown to be able to catch Naruto lacking inside of his Chameleon and throw out Shinra Tenseis to the point where even though Naruto dodges, like it does have an effect to where Naruto doesn't rejoin the battlefield for a period of time. He also just dodges version 2B and reacts to, or either just tanks him in his V2 Lariat. Some people argue one way or another, but either way, it's just good stock. So the way I would probably rationalize it is that gray-haired Nagato is also relevant in the war arc, and you kind of just have a full power Pain who should at least scale above that, at least in chakra reserves. And this goes in line with Pain because we know his chakra levels are variable. We know Nagato can focus chakra into one path or multiple, and just he can selectively choose to make a path stronger, or just have like maybe two paths stronger, or just like disperse the chakra. Like Pain's never at quite a set level. It's always kind of variable to who Nagato himself is actually fighting with the paths of Pain. So that's all I'll really add, but I think you did a really good job.
Yeah, I guess another thing that would be really interesting to mention would be Pain actually being called the strongest man in the Akatsuki, which will be something to be relevant brought up later. And me and TG both have our interpretations on this. A good one that we were actually just talking about was one he was actually pointed out to me was that there is another weekly release statement right after that basically says that Sasuke and Itachi's reunion was unexpected and shocking, showing that some of these are more ambiguous to the reader rather than the characters themselves. But yeah, I suppose we can kind of start off with the beachfront with, you know, like Darui Inoshikacho kind of replacing Pain and putting them in the spot of Kin and Gin. And this one's pretty interesting as we have like Darui, and I want to talk about Darui for a second because Darui actually has the mark of the third, and this mark was kind of reputable enough for Kinkaku and Genkaku to believe they were going to get a good fight out of Darui just on the basis of him having it, which is pretty telling as he also does use the Black Lightning, although he only uses it one time in the manga on White Zetsu, which are allies that Pain will also have in this fight, so I doubt the Black Lightning comes out. And considering that the Leaf and Cloud's battle power is basically consistent through all the data books, Darui could just be like the strongest Jonin from Kumo, and then Pain basically beats up and kills the strongest Jonin from, you know, Konoha, as stated in two different mediums, both the first data book and the first fan book both note that Kakashi is the strongest Jonin. So this is pretty telling for Pain's caliber. And then he also goes on to, you know, beat up Sage Naruto, and even like Shikaku. He's like, you can't intervene, you know what I mean? Like Naruto is a whole nother level by this point. So Darui probably isn't that much to Pain, and while he can combo attack with like V1A, I wouldn't really say this as much because we also know people like Suigetsu and like 3 Tomoe Sasuke can as well. And Sasuke also gets 4 exponential amps on top of this, you know, the MS and then his other mental amps by the time he gets past the V3 Susanoo state, where then he's compared to be, you know, equals to, or even one more also when he gets the full Susanoo in V4, where then he's then compared to be equals with Sage Naruto, and then Pain's just state to have power surpassing that. So, you know, there's like 4 exponential levels or 5 exponential levels placing Pain above Darui, and Darui is their main combatant, as Darui really is like the main one putting in the work against Kin and Gin. And we also do know like Samui and her brother helped a little bit, but it was kind of like a Kakuzu versus Kakashi situation where Kakashi was having to take a lot of focus to really protect his comrades in that situation due to them being a lower tier, and the enemy was taking advantage of that, like such as like how their, you know, fire style and stuff was about to catch them, and then Darui was saving them throughout the fight. So yeah, I really do think it's pretty telling that Pain just being above their strongest fighter or main fighter, how this fight would go. But yeah, do you want to touch on a few other fighters there, the why Pain should win?
Yeah. I mean, things like the Inoshikacho aren't that relevant, and the reason I want to add to this too, that we're kind of dialing in on this like little match, these micro matchups, and you're like, well, you know, there's a bunch of other Shinobi. We're gonna give Pain the White Zetsu that are also on the front. He's just taking the place of the Edo Tensei. So kind of look at this like, a lot of these matchups are going to be either against like pretty much against 1 or 2 paths of Pain, kind of similar to how it was in the Leaf, which while makes it more debatable, I think Pain also just does really well. Like for example, the Inoshikacho, while they are strong, it's not going to be, for example, the same Choji that's on Choza's level, the same Choza that just lost to Pain previously, Choza being Konoha's strongest war potential. And I know you brought this up to me, how that's more than likely in reference in his ability to just take out like more Shinobi as opposed to just like a strength thing, since we know he's not stronger than Kakashi, for example. So it's like, you know, and what he can do in war. So looking at that, it doesn't really look good. Like Inoshikacho probably doesn't have too much against Pain. And realistically, right, most of these paths of Pain are just kind of at that like Jiraiya to Sage Mode Jiraiya level in just terms of physicality or their abilities or their ability to react to attacks. They just kind of are around that tier. You have to ask yourself, who here is kind of at that tier in terms of it, starting with physicality and then moving backwards, you know what I'm saying? So that already sets up an issue. Now, could they do something against maybe the human path? Sure, I think so. But then you have fighters like Hiyashi who, like, you know, What is Hiashi doing? Was Hiashi just steamrolling the paths of pain in the original, in the original timeline against the Leaf? No, they weren't. So I don't necessarily see this company doing that well. And I also don't think Pain's the type of fighter that Ino Shikacho could really employ some crazy strategies against. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really see that happening. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I basically agree with everything you said. There really just isn't much for them to do. And despite, like, the paths, even the weaker paths that do fight Jiraiya are clearly shown superior, such as, like, he literally just fights, like, the animal and then, like, the human path and stuff. And the human path is able to catch a Sage Mode punch with his eyes closed, back turned, and everything in smoke. Like, bro, whenever I say that out loud, I always just sound funny talking about, like, Jiraiya scaling. So that's pretty telling, just to be honest. And we also know that, like, once you get into, like, those higher paths, if you do consider, like, the animal path to be one of the better paths, I would probably put it on the lower half, albeit at the higher end of the lower ends, he's probably the third worst path or whatever, you know what I mean? He's able to react to Kabari Senbon. The Preda is able to catch Jiraiya's strongest attack, the Big Baller Sengon, and actually hold it for like a few seconds before absorbing it. So even like these individual paths are just like clearly above Sanin tier, and are just much stronger than any of these other fighters as well. And even if you want to talk about like Kitsuchi, a lot of people do like to hype up Kitsuchi, and while I will say Kitsuchi probably doesn't get enough love, his feats just really aren't as impressive as some are made out to be. Like him holding the Geto Mazo, it's actually just that like his jutsu was next to the Geto Mazo. What I mean is the Geto Mazo literally just had like a full extension with his arm, so he was actually holding Kitsuchi, not the other way around. Like Kitsuchi couldn't get through, he was dropping to his knee, he had sweat running down his face, and the Geto Mazo was kind of chilling. And we also will just be giving Pain the Geto Mazo in this fight as well. And though his doesn't have the Bijou like the old one that fought Hanzo, we're just going to be giving him the Bijou, as like the scenario would be like Pain is obviously still alive, and then Kabuto's like, hey, you want to go take out Division? He's like, yeah, I got you. So he still obviously has the Geto Mazo, and it will have these Bijus, so we actually have some showings from it. So yeah, I think this beachfront right here is probably just getting slaughtered by Pain, as we haven't even talked about, like maybe he uses the chaotic Shinra Tensei against this company or whatever, as that obviously is just detrimental. So yeah, we definitely think...
One thing... One thing I would add, my bad. One thing I would just add, like real quick too, as well. People need to understand is that Pain has immaculate crowd control via his summons. He has the replicating dog, the jutsu specifically that he applies on that dog, the chameleon that really can't be sensed unless you're like a particular sensory shinobi. And even then, it's pretty cracked, since if you want to argue like Jiraiya has like passive Sage Mode sensory, not saying it's on the level of Naruto's, but he has it. He's still not sensing the chameleon. It requires Ma to use her tongue. You have the other summons like the ox, the bull, the crab, the bird, the panda, the centipede, the rhino. You have all these summons that are exclusive to Nagato himself that are just going to be pretty detrimental to the alliance, and just add for like pretty much breaking them up and allowing Pain to kind of like slash through them. That's the best way I could do it. Kind of similar to the Leaf, as again, pretty much Pain took on the entirety of the Leaf and only lost one path of Pain, which is just pretty insane to think about. I'm not saying he's just going to steamroll, but I'm saying you put this guy with all of these white Zetsu, it's not going to be that crazy. Like, we've seen similar types of feats before. This isn't really anything new. Pain is very comfortable with taking on large scale like groups of shinobi. We see things like the Preda path just aping entire like groups of shinobi from the Leaf. It's nothing too crazy. And you add in white Zetsu support, I think they pretty much clear. I don't think anybody's really that threatening to them. But just to throw that in.
No, yeah, I agree. So yeah, we definitely see Pain beating the that company in Kinkaku and Ginkaku's plays probably better than they did, just to be honest. But the next company is probably the hardest one to beat, and that's the Desert Company, as we will not be giving Pain his white Zetsu, as they just really didn't have it. And this is basically Gaara and Oniki and Tamari and Dodai. And I guess to start off, we can start with Oniki. Oniki is probably the strongest Kage by this point, and the reason why I say that is, like, basically when you look at all of his feats, his strength, raw strength, is obviously really good. He's able to hold up the Tengai Shinsei, something basically that would have just annihilated that company if it wasn't for him, just to be honest. But also when you look at his speed, which is really bad considering his particle style and just how deadly it is, being able to practically eviscerate anything. So when you look at the speed, you go like, okay, how fast is he? And he's able to be on top of the version 2 Raikage, pause, the V2 Raikage, and actually, okay, guys. All right, so he's actually able to combo attack with the V2 Raikage, and at a faster pace than V2, and then actually like make his weight go higher to make the attacks hit a little harder and whatnot. So he's able to react to a speed beyond the version 2 Raikage, who is obviously portrayed to be as like one of the fastest here. So obviously Oniki is probably the fastest Kage and the strongest one at that as well, which is pretty consistent as he does take this leadership role against Madara. So just kind of showing how strong he is. And whenever you look at Oniki, you look at this showing here against this company, like he doesn't do much. Well, why is this? Well, if you go back and count the amount of clashes he does with like Mu, you can get up to like 9 clashes they might have had with particle style, and he notes he can't even use a single one. This is why he's like falling to his knees, sweating on the ground, talking about his back, and then like Gengetsu can just fire like a water bullet through his neck and stuff. So he's clearly way out of it after that, and he's really not near as strong as he normally would be. And this would also be a Mu, who is the strongest of those Edo Kage, showing just again Oniki taking on the role, being the strongest of this generation of 5 Kage, fighting the strongest of the previous one, and also the Tsuchi Kage as well, as they do have similar abilities. So Oniki is the strongest here. And could he beat Pain? I mean, maybe. He actually just might be able to. And the reason why I say just might be is like with all this support, I could see it actually happening, as we do have like Gaara and like Tamari and Dodai. And I guess, well, you might not think Tamari's much and Dodai's much. We can talk about Tamari for a second. Tamari's actually stated to have like the strongest wind style in all of Suna, and it actually refers back to her casting net. And this is from one of the data books following Shippuden, but it does point back at her casting net, which does blitz the base 3rd Raikage, who obviously will get his nerve transmission speed upped when he's in the cloak and he fights KCM1 Naruto. But her wind style being this level is pretty crazy if you think that Gaara's sand is wind style rather than earth style, as there is no distinction actually made in the manga. So that's just something interesting to note for her. And she also does kind of note that she is like the best wind style user, despite her unconfidence around those scenes as well. And we also know that like this whole fight right here with the 3rd Raikage is kind of inconsistent, as he literally tells the Alliance to use earth style and they listen for whatever reason. So yeah, you could tell Kishimoto is probably bugging a little bit here, but yeah, Tamari is pretty underrated.
I believe that's corrected too in like the re-release of the manga. Like there's certain discrepancies like that in like Sasuke's MS when he like pulls up on the Hokage. It's actually just his regular Mangekyo, not his Eternal. So yeah, that's probably a discrepancy, because like that's a crazy thing, obviously, for to just use the wrong element. You know what I'm saying? Like that's probably a real thing. Continue. It's just funny. Like it's funny every time we talk about it. You know, it's like, damn, bro. I guess, is he trash? But nah. Yeah, it's not. It gets corrected.
No, I mean, yeah. You know what? I'll pass off another underrated fighter. You want to talk about Lord Dodai and then like Gaara and why they're good support?
Let me preach the Dodai gospel, man. Y'all need to understand that Dodai was out here reacting to the 3rd Raikage. His rubber jutsu was able to withstand blows. Now, I do want to make it clear that Dodai, the 3rd Raikage does kind of like stop the Hell Stab from just like going through Dodai's rubber. But it still does withstand the 3rd Raikage's blows and stuff like that. And then you also have crazier feats like Dodai's rubber surviving the Tengai Shinsei and protecting the Naruto clone. It's like, okay, is the rubber cracked? Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And then it kind of goes further where he kind of hops in with Genma and Raido and proceeds to fight the 50% Mu that used Fission, that's Kabuto controlled, maybe implying like he's able to keep pace with those. But yeah, Dodai actually does have some good feats and is relevant enough to just be support with that Naruto clone against the 3rd Raikage, which I do think is just good stock, honestly speaking. Like, it's good reaction. It's good, you know, the jutsu has some good defensive capabilities. I'm not saying, like, Shinra, it's going to block a Shinra Tensei, but surviving Tengai Shinsei just is pretty good. You know, that this speaks more so if, like, for example, Pain were to just unleash an almighty push. You could actually see a good case where Dodai's rubber might be able to survive that. Maybe also with Onoki, who just survived the Tengai Shinsei being dropped on his head. You know, there's certain arguments you can make since this company kind of was exposed to a lot of AoE type attacks.
No, yeah, I agree. There is a lot to really talk about here. But I will say him and Gaara do provide a lot of really good support for Oniki here. Just to be able to take down Pain. And one good thing, like, you know, when Pain's bodies go down, he puts them into the Naraka. So what happens when Oniki just like evaporates a path? You know what I mean? Or he just starts to evaporate the summons as a whole. Like, this becomes a problem because it ruins a lot of Pain's easy crowd control that allows him to commonly overwhelm opponents. You know what I mean?
Or just getting rid of the animal summon itself, which just cooks it entirely. Yeah,
and he can do that to basically any of the paths, and we've probably established him to be much faster than Pain and just like sheer reaction speed and whatnot. And he's also probably just stronger from the 5 Kage Summit if you go based on his will basically being renewed, and mental states are very important in Naruto in regards to power. So that's something to note, him just being stronger. But even then, you look at that, right, and you look at like Sasuke and what all the 5 Kage could do to Sasuke. I want to put it like this. Each Kage had their run with Sasuke, other than like Tsunade, of course, but then Danzo takes that place. Onoki gets the closest to killing Sasuke, and he only used 1 attack in the entire summit. That's pretty much like the caliber we're dealing with here, you know what I mean? So this is really telling for Onoki's power as well. And there is a lot he can do. Like, he can also just use like the mud golems and his other like ninjutsu that he could utilize as well. And you put this on top of Gaara, who can basically like erect the entire desert, like he also does against Deidara and stuff back in, you know, early Shippuden. That's just really telling for his scaling as well. So I would say that like Pain probably loses because he also has to battle all these guys without the white Zetsu. So there is a lot of like the other fodder Shinobi who will just be trying to jump him. And while that isn't that important, whenever you get like thousands jumping one path, I mean it's thousands, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're gonna have to be running through like Madara, and their attention will have to be focused on these randoms rather than the actual important fighters here, which is pretty telling. So we do think that Pain would likely lose to this like desert area.
And there's other things they could do. Like, we talked about, like, the sealing core also can just seal potentially some of Pain's summons. That could be something interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And they just generally do have a lot of options. Like, the desert terrain isn't insignificant. Like, Gaara is actually kind of clutch here, especially just with, like, large-scale sand burials. You brought up the fact to me previously that Onoki and Mu have an off-screen fight where Onoki uses, like, I believe it's 9 particle styles, like, between, like, him and Mu, where there's, like, that many clashes, or it's a significant amount of clashes. So you have to ask yourself, if it's not, you know, the Preda path or the Diva path, which would both probably just outright repel particle style, like, Onoki has that potential with Gaara to just kind of, like, take down those paths of Pain, along with all of these Shinobi, with Pain not really having that white Zetsu support. But I do want to say that even Chaotic Shinra Tensei is probably Pain's best bet, but you actually could make a case a couple of the Shinobi do survive that as well. Now, if they do, I don't think they're beating 5 paths of Pain, even if the Diva path can't use like all his abilities for a prolonged period of time. But that is something as well. And we don't see Chibaku Tensei ever coming out because that's more of like a sealing technique. And there would be no reason for him to ever want to like seal anybody here, like ever. So, I mean, yeah. How do you feel about like Almighty Push versus these companies? Like, do you think it's a viable option? Do you think it just cooks any of them? Or do you think they're maybe surviving in like a similar capacity to where like the Geto Mazo shoots like that lightning attack? What do you feel about it?
So I mean, listen, I think it's really good. I think it's by far his best win con, or just even, we say crowd control. This is crowd control at its finest. He's literally just AOE, eliminating so much via his AoE. His biggest AoE attack being the Chaotic Shinra Tensei, which literally wiped out the entire leaf, which is really telling as well. And I really think he could wipe them out, though I think like you can make cases for some of these Shinobi actually surviving. So I think if Pain does start to really lose and he just flies up and does this, and say Onoki doesn't fly up and chase him, I think it's pretty telling, though he could use that while Oniki's still on his ass and maybe level the whole company, and then Oniki might be kind of shocked and stuff, but then he's probably going to beat up the Diva, and then you're going to run into a problem, or just like even evaporate the Diva, and then you're going to run into the problem of like, okay, Oniki versus these other paths, you know what I mean? And then it gets kind of interesting from there as well. So I actually think that Pain has like a really good chance here against the Desert, although he does come in with a lot of disadvantages, also probably going against the strongest company. So there is just a lot going against him, and he kind of has to play a perfect game for this to actually go in his favor, is kind of how I'd probably word that. So do you agree that he probably loses, say, 6, 7 out of 10 times?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So the next one is the Forest Front with like Kakashi and Guy and like Lee and those guys. And this one's pretty interesting. And I suppose we can kind of start with Kakashi as well, because Kakashi obviously has fought Pain in the past. And while many people would say that this war Kakashi would be marginally stronger, much stronger, you know what I mean, than the one that fought Pain due to like some resolve amps, this could be true. Although I would like to grant that the amount that Pain was above that Kakashi is also really telling. Like, you look at how the Ashura just totally blitzes him with the Raikiri and stuff like that, this being Kakashi's strongest, or fastest move, which is super telling as well for Pain. So like, it's like, okay, did Kakashi grow the amount without fighting or anything? Because all we see is him fight the fatigue Sasuke. So did he grow in this amount up to this point that the Ashura path blitzed him? So is it that much of a difference? We don't really know. And you look at the Sasuke feat, and one thing people don't notice is like, okay, he actually was able to convoy away the Susanoo arrow. This is true, although
2 of them actually.
Yeah, two of them.
Yeah,
and one thing to note about these 2 is they actually don't have like I guess, what would I call this, velocity marks on the page whenever they fire out. Like all the other Susanoo arrows, when they're fired, they have these velocity marks around the arrow. These ones don't have that at all, which could be interesting. I thought about this counter for that, although I would still say they're at least relative to the other ones, but it's still pretty impressive. But again, it's Kamui. It's literally based on his perception, so either way, it's not really an anti-feat, and basically Pain would still be able to Naraka basically anything, and that's an advantage that Pain has, is there's 6 of him, not 1, so it's not like he can just Kamui off the one opponent's head, because there are 6 Pains. So again, we still say that like Pain would probably go into this fight slightly superior to this Kakashi, as all of his really good feats come, maybe 50-60 chapters after this point here, which is really telling again, as he is much stronger there. He's able to combo attack with like the 6-gate guy, fighting on a superior footing to KCM1 Naruto. And while many people will write off Pain even scaling to KCM1, I do want to kind of call this into question, as it is possible, as I think a full power peak Pain actually could probably be close to a KCM1 Naruto. If you go through a few different methods, like using the Raikage, or you might want to go with 6 tails, or you go with the reaction argument through like Sage Mode and stuff. So there are a few avenues just to say that Pain's probably not that inferior to a KCM1 Naruto and whatnot. So there are some methods to get around Kakashi and Guy, who's basically considered an equal to Kakashi, if not slightly under that. And there's a lot to talk about with Guy, but I've been rambling for a second. So do you want to talk about Guy?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is 7th gate Guy, right? This is the first and foremost, and I'm gonna say this right now. Guy has 1 Hirodora in the bag. He cannot spam it. Even later on in the war, he only uses 1, and it's not even like the same size as the one that he does on Turtle Island, right? So we're already just dealing with Guy's physicals in the 7th gate and 1 Hirodora, so we have to look at that. Now, Hirodora is a shockwave, right? It's just a shockwave of air. So looking at that, there's really no reason Shinra Tensei shouldn't put it away. Obviously, the Diva Path has to be the one to encounter this. But if he can just match it with the same like chakra output and just create a repulsion like of a similar magnitude, which we know he has a village wiping one, so he definitely can like do that. Should be able to do it. Other paths of Pain are not as fortunate, as Taijutsu is more so a bigger weakness for them, and I definitely think Hirodora would do well. I don't think Guy uses it here, because he would not risk just nuking his comrades, obviously. I don't think that's something that would happen. Along with the White Zetsu support, that this company's a little weird because the White Zetsu come in a little bit later, but we're just going to give it to Pain. It makes it a little more difficult. So if you're going to argue 7th gate Guy, you kind of have to argue Guy's physicals, because this area is just way too crowded. In which case, makes it a lot harder, especially since Guy probably can't maintain, or we know from his like short uses of the 7th gate that it leaves him very fatigued. Like he can't even beat a water shark. Like there's shark, like Kisame traps everybody into a water bubble, and Guy just loses to a shark 1v1 after the 7th gate, and then you got like B and Naruto just beating it up and stuff like that. So kind of looking at it like that, I do think 7th gate Guy could be threatening to the Biju, but I think if you look at his performance versus Kisame, I think it does set up a precedent that Pain would just be above this. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about. And while some people do kind of go down the route of Kisame actually being above Pain,
that's a horrible take. I'll say it. That's a bad take.
I was going to be generous, but we can talk about that.
I'm not full. I do think it's a shit take. But
you're right. It is a shit take. But here's a good way to look at that. So we established Pain being the strongest man in the Akatsuki initially in this video. So this already puts him above Kisame, right? And this is pretty interesting, because what is there to really say Kisame could beat up Pain? Nothing at all. You say he scales to B, and B scales to KCM1 Naruto later, and it's like B's whole thing is training. The first page he's introduced, he's literally training in the cave. He trains constantly You know what I mean? Like, this is clearly really weird. And he also has to kind of try to keep up with his brother for their combo attacks to be able to remain very in sync and synchronized overall. And we also do know that A does train. The fourth data book notes that A does train in his free time. And we also see him training in chapter 416, which is pretty important. So yeah, this is pretty clear. So Kisami's not like a KCM1 Naruto level threat, and his Guy isn't either, or at least by this point, as that's displayed a little bit better later. But you talk about Pain being above Kisame, and this Kisame was actually able to react equally with a 7th gate Guy and a less dense median, or a more dense median, underwater. So he's actually having to react and do his hand signs equally underwater. And this is pretty deep underwater, by the way, where Guy, his actual 7th gate aura is pushing the water off, so he doesn't have to. And we also know that this Kisame is likely not near his full power, as he obviously doesn't have Samehada, and Kisame is very prone to his Kinjutsu style of fighting, as he does this against basically like the Mist Ninja he kills back in the day, as you literally see him with a sword in one of their chests. He also does this against, obviously B. The data book implies he does it against Roshi, and even when Yagura pulls up after he kills his master, like Fuguki or whatever, he literally tries to grab Samehada. So obviously Samehada is his main weapon, not his water style. His water style is probably a bit more secondary material, and he's also kind of conservative with that though, because we don't really know how much chakra he absorbed, like whether it's like the correct amount or not that he actually needed to adequately like sustain his reserves. We just don't know. But he also kind of opts to using less I guess like taxing jutsu, such as how he uses a miniature shark bomb to overpower base Guy, where he knocks him over to kind of offset his balance, but then he hops inside of this same one to go underwater. So he's kind of trying to utilize the same jutsu over and over just to kind of save himself from utilizing too much chakra, which is pretty telling as well. So this Kisame is likely not even at full power, when a full power Kisame is also probably just under Pain, and obviously he's able to react to this 7th gate Guy. And we also know that Pain's reserves are likely probably better than Guy's. I don't think that's kind of crazy to say, or at least his stamina when you look at his feats against the Leaf Village. So Pain would at least be able to outlast his 7th gate Guy, and there's really nothing that Guy could really do against Pain, or anything like that.
And I want to add too, because I agree with what you're saying, and I don't want to cut you off crazy. We're referencing, because Guy, I do think Guy would do well against like a single or like 2 paths of Pain. We're just referencing Pain as a whole. Because I think Guy would perform very similarly to Kakashi, if not maybe a little better, just due to his distinct arsenals and stuff like that against maybe the similar type of position. But it kind of depends like which paths of Pain. Like if Guy throws up on the Preta path, yeah, like he's gonna cook him, obviously, like 1v1. It's not really gonna be an issue. But if he comes across the Diva path and Hirodora just, or 7th gate just gets countered, he's gonna get outlasted and he's gonna be in a weakened state. So you kind of have to also look at like who Guy is kind of going up against. But I do think Kakashi and Guy are the most like that's the duo that's gonna be like forefronting this character. Maybe Lee could also be useful, because Lee like kind of performs similar to base Guy, and there's a precedent to suggest like throughout the war, like Lee kind of approaches that base Guy level even in his base. But everybody else here, like Sakura, pre-Byakugo seal, Omoi, you know what I'm saying? Like the same Sakura who's just like 1v1ing the Centipede in the Leaf arc. Omoi, who just like got cooked by Haku. Same thing with Sai. Like a lot of these people aren't too threatening. So it's kind of like you have to ask yourself, like, these other people, these other ninja would probably just get dealt with like crowd control tactics. Whereas like it kind of turns into like, how would Kakashi and Guy do with the brunt of like Pain's abilities? And I do think they would do well, but I do think it is a very tough matchup. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And even then, you talk about like Sakura, and by this point, she doesn't really have any of her good feats that are shown a little later, when she's more comparable to like, or slightly under to a KCM 1.5 Naruto and EMS Sasuke in some ambiguous manner that she's compared to them in, she obviously probably wouldn't do as good as them against like Jubito or anything like that. And then we also get to like Omoi, and it's like, what can he do? He can cut sorcery strings. Good for him. Pain's killing him. So Pain probably does just pass, because he also still has the white Zetsu in this matchup as well. So we are saying that Pain probably just beats up the forest front. Although I actually think this one is probably pretty difficult for him in some aspects, with Guy and Kakashi being able to combo together. But I still think he can get the job done. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think the Zetsu support does make a difference
for sure.
This one. Like if it wasn't present, this would be a much higher diff fight. It would be pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, but then we're going on to the second forest front fight, which is basically like Mifune, Kankuro, some random samurai, and then like the Sealy Core. So this one might just be like the worst one. And we could talk about
it's a lot, bro. Yeah.
we can talk about some like two things. Like there's only really two things to really bring up here. I guess we could talk about Mifune. Like Mifune is kind of just above Hanzo, or like this old Hanzo that's in Edo and doesn't have his will. And this is pretty important, as his will is kind of what gave him his power, you know, his will to conquer the world and stuff. And Pain himself actually notes this when he fought Hanzo back in the day, and he's like, do you know the only reason why we beat you? You don't even know, you know. And he's talking about him losing his will. And so you can't really make any implications, because again, this just means that Pain actually probably fought a stronger, like, rusty Hanzo than Mifune fought, as we obviously know, like, Alive's greater than Edo. So again, this Mifune is not really that comparable to Hanzo, and this isn't anything to dunk on Hanzo, as Hanzo obviously like dunked on Mifune like at his prime and stuff, which is kind of telling as well. And obviously, you know, like, you could kind of say some stuff for Pain, like, you know, potentially being above, but we can still go into like a full power Pain being above Hanzo, but we could say
I would just add real quick to that Hanzo got no diffed and actually had like Hidden Rain Village Ninja as support, and they didn't even take down a single path of Pain. Pain has no external damage, so if you're looking at that, he no diffed somebody just out like slightly stronger in the version that Mifune fought. And even if you want to say Mifune stronger, Pain's showing just looks far more impressive and stuff like that. Now, you have to really virtue this. I personally subscribe to a full power Pain being above a full power
I do.
Yeah, okay. So I partially do this due to Jiraiya's assessment of it. How he hears, he pretty much knows how strong Hanzo is. He has a benchmark for that. Peak Hanzo. And he hears about someone defeating Hanzo, and he pretty much says, like, I might die. This is a high diff opponent for me, and then goes into Sage mode to essentially put himself a tier above that, which is just good Pain stock, because Pain's just pretty objectively above, like, that. Like Sonin plus like Sage mode, like
No, I was also just gonna say to briefly say something. Jiraiya does use Sage mode before the Pain encounter. We get flashbacks when Fukasaku's talking of basically Jiraiya in Sage mode, like when he says, "Oh, he was actually one of the best ever at it." You can actually see Jiraiya in Sage mode. In the background is Mount Miyaboku, and you can see this in two different panels. So he obviously has used Sage mode, so he knows where his level's at there as well. So
yeah, exactly. No, I love that you brought that up. So it's just pretty consistent. But even if you say they're in a similar range, like, okay, that's just still going to be above Mifune. And I know some people try and argue, like, the Mifune statement where, like, Hanzo kind of credits Mifune. He's like, you know, I couldn't really take a risk with you. While I understand that, he also just doesn't remember Mifune's strength at all, but remembers people like Chio or Pain. So I don't really think Mifune's showing was that crazy. He was not that memorable, and Hanzo could have also just gotten stronger from that point. Like, there's different interpretations. And that's the real issue, because who else is here? Kankuro? Random Samurai? You know, like, come on. Who's like?
Listen. Kankuro implies he's actually a better puppet user than Sasori. Sasori killed the third Kazekage. You know, he's the strongest Shinobi in the data book, above Hokage Miento, above Obito. Crazy stuff for Kankuro. Don't downplay. No downplay.
I like Sasori, but Pain would put Sasori on his wall. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. He'd make a display out of him. So there's no real.
He taxidermy the puppet body.
So there's not really too much. The Random Samurai aren't really threatening. You know, beginning of 5 Kage Summit Sasuke wasn't, you know, just kind of was like chopping wood with them. Kankuro, I mean, what is he doing? You know what I'm saying? Relative attack speeds to Tamari, you know, like nothing really that crazy here. Not too much. And while these aren't bad feats or bad showings, it's just nothing really for like a full power Pain.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's basically all we really have, other until we go to like this boss round being the 5 Kage. And basically, could Pain actually take on the 5 Kage at once? And to be honest, in the war, probably not. Now, if it was Pain in the summit, I think he wins, like, actually kind of easily. But all in the war, no, I don't think so. Do you want to start off on that real quick?
So the problem with Pain in the war is that, like, I don't think. You hear these topics a lot. Itachi versus the 5 Kage, Nagato versus the 5 Kage. And while I understand them, I think people need to understand how much objectively, how many tiers higher you have to be above the 5 Kage to do what Madara did. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty ridiculous. And even then, that you kind of get into character stuff. Pain is not at a level where he can just do what Madara did and make the 5 Kage look absolutely garbage, especially when you're dealing with stronger variations in the form of Onoki. You have a Gaara who got stronger from his fight with Rasa, that's noted in the data book. You have Tsunade using the Byakugo seal for the first time and just is stronger, possibly Ampere. All this ridiculous stuff. And then you have like Madara reacting to like a Light and Raikage. Pain is not in the like tier where like all of his paths are going to be able to survive that. Even with like raw firepower, there are ways for the Kage to mitigate that. Like they could just hide inside of Katsuyu. Okay, now it's 5 paths of pain versus the 5 Kage. Good luck. You know what I mean? You kind of turn into this area where like this is more so a realm for like a more like prime Nagato or something like that this discussion should take place. I don't really think Pain's like full power feats or anything like that really indicate that he would just be at the tier to where he could just like bolo the 5 Kage by himself. Although I don't think he would do bad. I don't like, again, it's just pretty ridiculous to be at that tier. I don't think people grasp it. Like you're dealing with way too much, and the combinations they perform are just like cracked. You can continue.
Yeah, when people like take old Hiruzen statements about him being above the 5 Kage, it's an individualistic statement. It's not him being above the 5 Kage like Madara. So it's not like that. So people do kind of like underestimate the 5 Kage as a unit, and Pain really won't be able to win. As like earlier we were really talking about Inoki alone, right? And we also talk about his reaction speed. Okay, what is it he's reacting to that's going to be fighting him here? And it's like, okay, you look at like these panels here, like on screen of V2 like A lightened, you know, with Oniki, like punching Mu, like he's literally turning invisible, he's moving so fast and stuff like that, which is actually kind of a consistent theme for the Raikage. So obviously this V2 lightened Raikage basically is faster than every single path. I don't think that should really be contentious, especially by this point, as this V1 Raikage was able to keep up with KCM1 Naruto. So you add like V2, and depending on your interpretation, like V2 Raikage versus KCM1, maybe you think like the Raikage wasn't going all out because he's like, here I come Naruto, and he doesn't really seem to be that serious or whatever, right? You can say what you want. Here he probably is above KCM1 Naruto by at least a margin, you know. And is Pain? We don't really know, and if he is, it's pretty close. And then you also have other combatants who can combo with this, you know, such as like Tsunade. In some occasions he's able to combo in some regards, you know, to like really put some damage into the Susanoo whatnot. So they do work really well here actually together. Like for example, like Tsunade is able to punch away like Madara's like cater wall and whatever, which is just pretty telling as well. So we do know that the 5 Kage probably could beat Pain, although I would say it's like they would win like 7 out of 10 times, like I do, or 7 or 8 out of 10 times. So I do think there is options for Pain. Say if he uses like a chaotic Shinra Tensei and then just manages to play a perfect game from there, and you give him those higher interpretations. But again, you're quite literally giving everything to Pain and nothing to the 5 Kage. So if you equal this out, you like he's losing like 9 or 10 out of 10 times. And it's kind of just a bad stylistic matchup. But yeah, that's the video. I do want to say appreciate you TG coming on here. We ain't had a little collab in a minute, but it's been good to get back here. And we also have another one of these on his channel. You guys should definitely go check out right now if you haven't already. And it's basically the same matchup, being Pain versus the villain. So it's going to be him versus Kinkaku and Genkaku, and you know, the Edo Kage, and then Itachi and Nagato as like the boss round or whatever, like we do with the 5 Kage. So that's also going to be a pretty interesting matchup. So head over to his channel, hit subscribe if you're not already for whatever reason, and you know, peep that video. If you like this one, then you know, maybe consider, you know, commenting, subscribing. I definitely am curious to hear what you guys thought. But yeah, as always, God bless you guys. Have a great day, great night wherever you are, and love you guys.